Hey, good morning, everybody, and a very happy Mother's Day to all of the moms out there. So, this is going to be the watch list for Monday, May 13th. Okay, so what I want to start with is next week is chock full of economic news. So, you are going to want to be very, very cognizant of these news events because what we've been seeing is a tremendous amount of market volatility as soon as news dropped. And we clearly saw that on Friday with the consumer confidence numbers coming in below expectation and the market sold off really hard. So what do you have Monday morning? Again, these are Eastern time, so this will be before the market even opens. If you have the Fed Vice Chair Jefferson talking and then the Cleveland Fed President Mesters talking. So we'll want to see how the market reacts pre-market before it actually opens. So keep an eye on that. Going into Tuesday, again, we have some big numbers, the producer price index and the core CPI. So that's going to give us a real hint as to what is inflation doing. Is it coming down? Is it going up? As you know, if inflation is stuck or it's trending higher, then the FOMC is not going to be even considering lowering rates. And the longer rates stay higher, the more pressure it's going to put on margins for companies. It's going to put more pressure on homeowners and individual debt borrowers, right? Because interest rates are higher, so their expenses are still remaining elevated. And the likelihood that we get some Fed rate cuts is not going to be positive, which will be a huge detractor for the bank stocks. So keep an eye on the bank stocks that they could have a fairly decent sell-off, especially those that are now trading at the top of the range. Your JP Morgan Chase, your Wells Fargo, your Bank of Americas. The regional banks are still under a ton of pressure and are at least 30% off their all-time highs. So the regional banks will probably get pummeled even further if the Fed says don't see any rate cuts coming. Therefore, definitely steer clear of your SoFis and your New York community banks. The smaller banks are going to be hit the hardest, especially, in my opinion, those that are under $50 billion in asset size. So then let's go to Wednesday. We have the consumer price index. We have the CPI year over year revenue numbers. We have U.S. retail sales. So are sales slowing? Are they going up? You're going to want to be very cognizant of that. And then you also have the manufacturing and the home builder confidence. So what's going on in housing? What's going on with housing inflation? We go over to Thursday and you'll see we have initial jobless claims. So what again is happening with the overall unemployment number? And is that holding steady? Is it going up? Now, mind you, if unemployment is going to go up, the market is going to like to see that because the only reason the Fed would think to cut rates is twofold. One, inflation is coming down and unemployment is going to be too high. We have some import prices. We have industrial production. I mean, we just have a lot of news this entire week coming up. And then on Friday, we have another Fed governor that's going to be speaking. And again, you just never know what they're going to say. So let's get out of that and let's go ahead and take a look at some charts if we could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the SPY if we could. And we'll take a look and see how that's been reacting. So again, news comes out on Friday, market sells down hard. Again, we are trending at almost all-time highs. So the market all-time high was at 525. We're at 520. I don't know. I mean, the market can keep grinding higher, but you'll notice when there's a negative news event, it sells off pretty hard. For me personally, I'd be waiting for us to come back down to this 518.50 to maybe take a bounce and head higher. If not, my bias would be to be cognizant and see how do the news events take place over the coming week, and then does the market sell off to the downside? So my downside targets would be the 518.46, the 517, back down to 515, and then into 512. So I just don't know what's going to propel us higher other than FOMO. I mean, that's where we're at right now. Let's take a look at the triple Qs. Kind of the exact same thing. Negative news event comes out and the market just sells off. Maybe waiting for a rebound. Where would that be for me personally? Well, again, we're almost right back here to all-time highs. Do I want to go long the market? I think you could play it for some potential upside, but I would just be sitting patient and waiting to see how these news events come down and then see if the market sells off precipitously to the downside. You know, a downside target that I like that's a long way off is going to be this 433. You know, we used it as resistance, 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 and then it finally became support. If I was going to look for a level in the interim, you know, where would that be? And I would be somewhere down here, probably around the 437 level, where we found some support back here. We had support here. We used it in an overnight before we pushed up. So 437 would be my target to the downside, and then 433 from there. Let's take a look at a couple of individual names. So one that had a tremendous amount of momentum over the last couple of weeks was Apple. So you can see these were all my downside targets that I had left. And then what did we have? We actually had an earnings event that just skyrocketed the stock to the upside from literally 172 all the way to a high of 187. And what did that have to do with? Well, a couple things. One, they announced a dividend of 25 cents per share, but then they did the world's largest buyback of stock. Apple is flush with so much cash that they are just buying their stock back. And then you had a little bit of a negative news event with Warren Buffett selling a fairly sizable portion of his position. And I don't think that he sold it because he didn't like the stock. He was just too overweighted. So that's one of the things, as you all know, don't get too overweighted in a single individual stock. So kind of watch how Apple functions here. I mean, I think we could get a little bit of more momentum back to the upside. So watch your trend line for a bounce. And again, if we're going to play this to the high side, we had really good momentum on Friday, going into it until the news event, and then we sold down. Where are we here with kind of this intraday double top right around this 184.90, 185 number? So I think you could probably go long to that. And then if you can get above it, you'll probably be going back to all-time highs. Let's look at a couple of the chip names. So let's look at Nvidia. Nvidia has an announcement that's going to be coming out here on May 22nd. So you're probably going to get a lot of chop and a lot of volatility. Now, this one, as you know, has been on an absolute rip-roaring tear that's been a nonstop freight train. And what it's kind of doing now is it's building itself into somewhat of a wedge. And I think we're going to have to wait and see how does that play out going into earnings. So if you just kind of watch where we're at, I think there's definitely some opportunity for this one to get probably back up over $1,000 a share, but it's going to take a little bit of time to see which way are we going to break, to the upside or do we break lower? Now, if we break lower, this one is probably going to move significantly, probably at least 10 to 15%. And why is that? Because when you look at the fact that this thing has just been on a tear nonstop, it's got to probably give some back. So when I look at it with the overall supply and demand, you'll see that we have a small gap below. Let me just enlarge this for you so you can see where we're at. We got a small gap down here on the daily at about 870.4 down to right around 862. So if they miss earnings, we'll probably come down, fill the gap, find some support, and then move higher. But this is one you'll definitely want to keep an eye on. What I'm going to call as a sister company is AMD. So it will usually get a relief play depending upon what Nvidia is doing. Now, mind you, on this one, we were all the way up here at 227, and now we're trading down here at 151. I mean, that is a significant haircut. And then at the end of the day, we're still in a downtrend. So let's forget about the supply and demand. But we had a high, we had a lower high, we had a lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. We are still not back above, at least on a daily basis, getting past some of these prior pivot highs. So I probably would not want to look to go long until you could start to break some of these previous daily highs, which are going to act as resistance. Now, mind you, they're fairly close. So let's look at it on a 5-minute chart and see is there any opportunity. Again, probably want to watch for the pre-market open, see what happens. But again, we had some really good momentum, again, going in on Friday. until that news came out, and then the market sold off hard. So again, these are the stocks that I would be very cognizant of that have a lot of alpha, that when they move and they move to the downside, they move pretty hard. So you can see where we bounced, we actually came down and failed and then moved back above, and then we've been using it as support. So if we drop below this 150 level, then I would definitely want to be aware as to where might you go on a lower time frame. And for that, again, I'd probably go back to the 1 hour to find the strongest overall zones. And the one that I probably like the most is going to be right down here, right around 147 to the downside. So, I mean, while it's not a lot in dollars, momentum, these things can move very fast. And then where do I like another support? Right down here at about 141. Most of this happened overnight hours, so there's just tremendous volatility. I would definitely watch while the market is open. So, and then the last one I want to look at was Meta. Meta, again, had tremendous strength. And I've been watching this fib level from a daily time frame perspective from the prior high where we were at going into earnings, and then the market dropped significantly. And then what is it doing? It went back and it filled the gap. So the 50% fib level retracement was 472.99. I think if we get below that, that's when I would probably look to go short. Now, the other thing is the gap has not yet filled. So you could have a price target to the upside. Let me remove this. Price target to the upside is going to be 484.58. But then if we start to head lower, I think we could retrace some of these gains. Let's look at it on a 1 hour time frame. And you'll note that, again, we've been able to just kind of grind higher. If you get pre-market momentum, that would be my price level that I'd be looking at, is at 484.58 to push to the upside. And then again, back to the downside, just watch overall market weakness and sentiment. But as you can see on this one, the stock is still, on a nice uptrend, moving up, respecting this line. So you could get a bounce here. If not, a fail down lower. And then again, just kind of be cautious with this one. So a lot of it is going to be dependent upon the news events. And with that, make sure that you have your calendar marked and you're paying attention so that you don't get caught up in a trade when news actually drops. So with that, I hope you guys have an absolutely fantastic day. And again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Take care.